This is the first time I'm ever going to say this out loud, so now I'm going to be accountable to it.
Accountability.
There's something called 4x48 that
What is this?
you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
Oh. Okay, when are you doing it?
Don't have a deadline yet, but I've now spoken it, so I have to do it.
That was Michigan dairyman Tommy Oesch from Swisslane Farms when he joined us last July on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast for episode number 35, our number one episode of all time, the 7,000 Cows in 7 Years Vision. And today, on episode number 100, we are celebrating by bringing Tommy back to find out if he followed through with this grueling physical and mental challenge that he committed to last summer. And he's brought a friend to join us, fellow Michigan dairyman Clare Alderink, general manager at Ryzebol Dairy. Did they follow through with running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours? Well, you're about to find out right here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will up-level your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. And this episode today is all about mindset. We're honing in on self-discipline, developing habits, and doing hard things, and how in the past couple of years, these two friends have chosen running not just as an exercise, but as a way to develop discipline. And that discipline shows up in every other aspect of their lives, as dairymen, businessmen, managers, with their families, and in their friendships. So if you are pushing for your next level of performance, I promise this episode drops some real life wisdom and will leave you with a new vision of what's possible for you too. And if you're like me, you might even end up signing up for a marathon by the time you're done listening to this. This episode is sponsored by Adisseo. Adisseo is a global leader in nutritional solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Enjoy this conversation with Tommy and Clare. Okay, explain for those that don't know, that have never heard of this craziness. What is a 4x4 and 48?
So just to start, like, you have some responsibility in this, Peggy, because on the first podcast I was on, you asked what was my next personal up level. Well, Claire and I had both just read both of the David Goggins books before I was on that podcast, and we had talked like, hey, we should do 4x4x48. Well, 4x4x48 is something David Goggins came up with during COVID. He's an ultra marathoner. And all the ultra marathons, the in-person ones, were shut down. So he came up with this thing that people could do on their own. Before I had done that first podcast, just coincidentally, we were just coming off of reading those books, and Claire was like, we should try that 4x48 someday. I was like, yeah, that sounds all right. And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, we should. Yeah. But one of those things, we talk about a lot of things we should do, right? But then you asked, oh, what's your next personal up level? I was like, within the next year, I'd like to do 4x4. I'm going to do 4x4x48. And what that is 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So 48 miles in 48 hours with some short breaks in the middle. And Claire, I felt like he was like holding me accountable to this thing. Like, he said, you're going to do it. Like, when are we, and he wouldn't say that. He'd say, when are we going to do this thing? So we started on Friday at 10 o'clock. And interestingly enough, one of our good friends, Aaron Gasper, he's a really good dairyman, another guy in our peer group that we all look to as like, he's one of the best dairymen I know, really. I think we inspired him to start running about a year ago, and we happened to call him. I think both of us talked to him that Friday he's like, hey, I did a run at 6 o'clock this morning. Is it okay if I count that as my 10 o'clock and just join in? He ran every mile of it with us, all 48 miles.
Holy cow.
That's the most impressive part of all of this is what he did.
Oh,
he's like, hey, you guys, I'm going to go. Can I join you? Yeah. No, we've been training. We've been doing 75 hard. We've been doing lots of spending all of our time. That's part of why the timing of this was like, hey, let's get this done while we're in this window. So we're not thinking you don't have it looming over us, right? And then Aaron calls 8:30 And it's like, I'm going to run 48 miles with you guys in the next 2 days. I'm like, okay.
He's kind of a runner. Like he had been running, like not so much.
We were training for something like this. We were kind of testing, making sure. And he was just running he's been doing a lot of running, and it just was like, it was very surprising to hear that somebody, like, he was just going to jump in and do it with us. And that's what inspired me.
Yeah. And then a lot of the runs, he was the one texting us like 15 minutes before, you got your shoes on. And we were like, I can't believe this guy's still in. And, Claire and I kind of talked about this. Neither of us are good runners, right? You look at how I'm built and you'd be like, well, yeah.
It looks like farmers running. Just imagine that. But it's not only about running when you're out there. You're doing lots of different things, and it's how you like to start your day.
So essentially there ended up being 3 of you that did this 4x4 and 48, and that was early March, so just a few weeks ago. And that was you honoring a commitment that you made, gosh, when we would have talked probably like July of last year. And FYI, that has been the #1 episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Was that the trigger moment for both of you when you're like, we should go through with this? Like, we should actually do the thing, because we all get good and crazy ideas. But then it's like, okay, reality sets in. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard. And I don't just mean hard to do the activity, but the challenge sometimes, and as a runner, I find this as well, is like fitting this into life. Right? Because, okay, let's back this out. You are family men, you are dairymen, you're active in your church and your communities. And then this commitment is another big time chunk in your schedule that wouldn't have been there before. So let's talk about that training piece, right? So physical training, what did it take to get ready for running a 4x4 and 48?
Running every day, pretty much. I was running 6 days a week for probably, for sure since the first of the year. Claire, I think, what'd you run? 360 out of 365 days in 2023? Something like that?
I ran a lot. I run a lot. I like to run in the morning. It's just how I start my day. Sometimes the runs are not real valuable physically, but it's just my program, and I try to stay disciplined and make myself do it. Now, sometimes you should take days off and rest your body, because it's not smart to keep doing that. But I learned some of those things. Yeah, just running every day and steady, slow running, and just trying to build up endurance. I trained for a couple races last year, so I have 2 programs doing that. But just normally just talking with Tom, and how many miles are we going to run today? Like 5-6 miles, whatever you got time for. But I find I've always got time before my day starts. If it's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. or in the summertime, get up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. So the run's done first, so that I'm committed. That has to happen. If I want to do all the other stuff, that's cool. But that's kind of like the gateway for me to get to the rest of my day. I've made that such a habit. And I think that's the main reason I run, is for the discipline of just making me do it.
I'm going to validate this for you, because I think when I first had been introduced to you, Claire, the 3 of us were out at the same conference. I think it was GPS Leaders Forum. And I'm in the elevator after my indoor workout. And then I see you 2 guys that just are coming back from your outdoor morning runs. You got your outdoor gear on, you got your reflective stuff. I'm like, you guys are the real deal. And oh my gosh, I'm such a wuss. I've just been on the treadmill in this warm building. But I'm just going to say, like, you're saying this, but I've seen it. I've seen you guys at meetings when it could have been your excuse to sleep in. And you decided, we're going to get up and we're going to hit the trail. We're going to hit this trail and we're going to do the run, and we're going to do it before it's light outside. And so I've seen you do it. That's how, I think that's originally how I had first been introduced to you, Claire, through Tommy, was you guys just getting back from your run. So, I mean, no BS here. Like, you guys are living this thing. Like you said, you've been running, you've been keeping it up, you've been doing the thing. And so training all along, coming off of that marathon from last year, but just keeping those miles up, motivating each other. Tommy, anything else that really came into play for you with your physical side of training?
It's interesting. I have 2 people that I share my Apple Health stuff with. It's my wife and it's Claire. But there's a lot of mornings I get out and he's got his run done before I even get my shoes on. I'm like, right. And if there's any doubt whether I was going to put my shoes on or not, it's like he's already got it done. And a lot of it, when just talking about the mental piece of it, mornings like this morning is a great example. We talked yesterday. I told him I'm running a 5K in the morning. That's on my schedule, my plan, whatever. I'm going to go out and I'm going to not just run a 5K. I'm going to go out and try to PR my 5K tomorrow because that's part of my training is I'm going to run a 5K as fast as I can in the morning. And I'll tell you, I'd rather go run 8 miles at a heart rate of 140 than go run 3 miles with my heart rate at 170. It's just way more comfortable, right? But I got my kids they had a snow day, right? It's snowing like crazy right now. I knew when I got out of bed, before I even lifted my head off the pillow, I'd got the alert that they had no school. So I knew it was crappy out, right? So it's like, you know what? So I'm accountable to somebody that I'm doing this. And so this morning I went out, I put my shoes on and PR'd my 5K this morning. So there's a lot of mornings that we ran between January 1st and March 1st that were not very nice. There were some terrible mornings for running, but that's that mental training and it's accountability. Yeah, absolutely.
And doing the hard things, right?
That's why we did the 4x4. That's why we did it, because Tom said we would.
Yep.
So after that point, the contract was signed. It was time we were going to have to do it. Like, if you want to do something that you're a little scared to do, I mean, for me, if I announce it that I'm going to do it, then it's over. There's no more decision left to be made. You have to follow through with it. And that's the way both of us are. Like, okay, well, I told everybody I'm going to. It's easy if you just have some personal goals that are not stated, that you keep quiet. And then if you don't make it, but if you really want to be held accountable, make some bold statements, have some ideas, and go try to do stuff you don't think you can do.
And is that half of the mental training, is just having that commitment and accountability to someone other than yourselves?
And even like a weekly basis, I do that with the people that I work with. I'll tell them, hey, this is what I'm going to be up to. Well, that helps me get those things done if I tell everybody what's on my list, or else what's going on here, right? And then it's not everything. Sure, there's stuff that stays on the list and just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, but it's part of the system. And I think that's it. That's stated. Why did we do it? Because we said we would.
And
one of the things
you did
that's been really cool is in the training. Claire was training for a marathon in 2023, and I trained for a 25K. It's the Fifth Third River Bank Run in Grand Rapids. It's the biggest 25K, I think, in the country. A lot of people run it, but it was the 6th time that I'd run it. And I'd always wanted to run it in 2 hours. And I'd been close a few times, but the first time I ran it I was 25 years old. And this year I was 41. And Claire had a goal. What was your goal in that marathon, Claire?
4 hours.
4 hours. And which was like he had to run
an hour and 20 minutes faster than my previous marathon. So it was a little bit of a lofty goal.
Yeah, it's a push.
Disaster once. Yeah.
But he ran that, like, and I remember, like, you can track your friends through this Race Joy app. I'm sure you've done it. And so I remember the day he was running his, like, I was getting alerts, and I was at my daughter's volleyball game, and I'd gone for a run that morning. And while I was running, I was getting his mile times coming over my headset, and it was a really cool experience. And there was times I was like, he's running too fast. Slow down. You're gonna die. And after I ran mine in 2 hours, he was the first person I called, like, oh my gosh, I did, and he knew already that I did it, right? Like, but that was a really cool experience to like hit a couple milestones that really there's no reason I should have ran that race faster at 41 than I did at 25, but it proves that you work at something, you can do, your body will do a lot more than you think it can.
Oh,
That's
isn't that the truth?
I guess inspiring about it, or exciting about it, is to see Tom work on something so hard, and then he got it, right? That's the ultimate feeling. And that for him too, right? Like, I felt high for a week after that. Like, cause I was very nervous stating that this is where I wanted to be, but I thought, okay, well, if everything goes just right, I'll be okay. But just to see somebody work so hard at something and get it right. And that can be anything. It doesn't, I mean, like, we get a lot of stuff, and we're going to get more. We'll always talk about running all the time, because that's why you run, to talk about running, right? But it's just the thing that we do for the discipline and for the self challenge. But pick something and go with it. It all kind of works the same. That was what kind of springboarded everything last spring. My goal was to do that and then just walk away from running forever, kind of redeem what I was doing. And no way, running's really, really good for me. I have a great running coach, a guy that advises me. He sends me a plan every week, so I'm accountable to that, and that helps me just to have structure and just. There's so many good things.
By the way, I'm not the coach. I'm not the running.
He's
coach.
my coach. Yeah, that's right.
You're the you have a coach and then you have a cheerleader.
Yeah, exactly. I'm often tag teaming off of his coaching advice is. So.
Which is awesome. And then just one more thing you guys can use to push each other forward. And so, so as you're doing that, and you had these previous experiences of both having race related goals and being able to achieve them and to cheer each other on along the way, when you decide to do this 4x4 and 48, so 48 miles in 2 days with only 4 hours in between runs. And so mind you, that includes overnight where you're not getting a full night's sleep. So that's a big push on the mental challenge there. So walk us through what was it like? What were those 48 hours of running with only intermittent rest? What was it like?
I would say miles 16 to 30 were the hardest for me. After that fourth run, I was like, oof, this is different than running one day.
Miles 16 through 30. What time of the day would that have hit for you?
So it was, probably it was that overnight 10, 2, and 6 of the first, 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 6 a.m. of Saturday morning. And then I had a friend that came and ran the halfway run with me, which was like that 24-mile run. It was hard, but once I got past that halfway point, I was like, oh, your body can run every 4 hours. I think I shoved over 500 grams of dairy protein into my body in that 48 hours, and it really helped me handle it really well. And then I had my cousin Annie, who's my partner at the dairy. She ran with me at the 2 p.m. run on Saturday. And then another good friend of ours, their daughter they did 75 hard with us, and their daughter's my son's age. She's a cross country runner. So she ran the 6 p.m. with me. And then a guy from church ran the 10 p.m. run with me. And then after that 10 p.m. run on Saturday night, I had the 2 a.m. and the 6 a.m. run. And I was like, man, I got this, right?
Wow.
I'm actually going to get this done. And the last run was my favorite run, maybe just because I was like, I'm just going to go out there and see and let it all hang out. And I got done, and my wife was standing in the driveway when I got done, like cheered me on, and at 6 a.m., which was really cool. So that was my experience. And it was like having those guys, especially after the halfway point, it was like we were calling each other and texting each other before every run, like, all right, how's it going? How you feeling? Let's do it.
So there was a point, like you said, where it got real hard. Did you have any doubts? Did you ever think about giving up in those middle of the night, burning the midnight oil runs? Or was that just a non-negotiable?
That was non-negotiable. It was like, no. Once those guys, you knew they had their shoes on, it was like, we're doing it, right? We're going.
So that was the hard part, but you were able to break through that. And then you mentioned that the last 4 miles. It sounds like you had a renewed energy, like an insane, almost like runner's high. What happened in those last 4 miles?
Oh, I don't know. But for one, I wanted to be done, right? Headed out, I ran pretty much the same route every time, and I got my feet hurt when I put my shoes on. But once I started running, it was funny. I think I felt, and I think Claire would say the same thing. I think at the end, we felt worse before we started running than we did once we got out and got our legs moving. Then it's like, okay. Once you're out the door and your legs are moving, it's like, all right, I'm going, and no matter what pace I go at here, I'm gonna get through this 4 miles. And so that last 4 miles for me. And like I did some, especially as I turned the corner, the halfway corner on that last run, and I knew my pace was a minute faster than I had run, and I still had gas in the tank. Because a lot of my quiet time, my prayer time is often when I'm running, right? I just was like, what do you want for me out of this, God? And it just was like, here you are running the last leg of this thing faster than all the rest of it. And this is what I want your days to be. Every day can be better than the one before. And that's up to you. But you have to go out there and attempt the day first. Get your legs moving. Get the day moving. That was just a really kind of, for me personally, and Claire, I know will have a different story to tell, but for me, that was like what I got out of it. We can live every day better than the one before if we choose it.
And it sounds like what really came to you in the early hours of the morning, the darkness of the night, the stilling of your own mind was just the reinforcement that motto that you have for yourself, that mantra was just really confirmed that that's exactly how God wants you to live out every single day. And that race, you finished faster than you started.
I did. Yep.
And what was your pace? Brag. I want you to brag. If you don't do it, I'm going to do it for you.
The last 4 miles were a 7:19 pace, that's a fast pace for me.
That's super fast. That is so incredible, Tommy. So inspiring. And that's your story. But I want to hear Claire's story. What was 48 hours and 48 miles like for you?
I didn't enjoy it all that much, to be totally honest with you. But it was, for me, physically, it was fine. I was probably a little bit overtrained and maybe shouldn't have been trying to run 48 miles in that window, but I mean, I got it done. The running part wasn't really, I mean, that probably was the most comfortable time for me. But watching Tom and seeing what the people that he was inspiring and having the people running with him and having Aaron run along with us, that was the most enjoyable part of it for me. I mean, towards the end of it, I was getting fine amounts of rest in between the runs, but just to know that those guys are getting up and doing it, that's what we're doing. And that's also why I'm doing it, because they know that I am doing it. And if I'm not doing it, then I'm not being accountable to them. And that was just the whole deal. Like once it was started, the hardest part about the 4x4 was starting the 4x4, figuring out when we were going to do it. That was it. Once we did it, once we were going, yeah, you're tired, you're sore, you do all the things. Well, look at what you're doing. But starting, saying we're going to do it, and once we're going, we went, right? And finishing it was still great, and I was really happy that it went well for Tom and for Aaron. It was a cool accomplishment, definitely, to get done. But yeah, getting started, that was the hardest part for me.
And do you think it's kind of like that with almost everything, right?
Yep.
Sometimes the thing that's a big challenge, we can just put off starting at all, but you did the thing. You started, you put the shoes on, you laced them up, and you got moving, and you followed along. You followed each other along the way. Going back to what Tommy shared too, when you really look at what space does it put you in when you have pushed your physical and your mental limits and you're alone in your own head. That's what happens when we run, right? Tommy talked about that. As a runner, I can resonate with that as well. What did you learn about yourself in those 48 hours?
There's a lot you have to overcome in life, right? Like your mind will talk you out of just about everything that's good for you. You can overcome that self-doubt, negative talk. I think Claire sent me this one, and it's probably a David Goggins quote or video or post or something, but it's like when I get to heaven and God shows me my potential in life, he says, "Oh, I had this potential for you right here to feel good, to run races." And I'm still pretty young, I feel like, but I'm going to take my kids on spring break this year. We're going to go hiking, and I'm going to enjoy hiking with my kids. And we're going to hike further than a lot of people can. We're not going to go set hiking records or anything but I'm going to be able to go enjoy that with my kids, and I'm going to be able to feel great the whole time. And that for me, if I got to heaven and God said, I had this trip planned for you that you could go and enjoy with your kids, and I'm like, oh, but I was 40 pounds overweight and I couldn't breathe good enough and walk good enough to go do that with my kids, I'd be like, oh, man, I want to be able to do those things,
Claire, how about you? What did you learn?
You learn a lot about yourself when you do hard things. I mean, if anybody that hears this knew me before I was 35 years old, they know I never ran once. It never happened. No, it's not my thing. Exercising, not my thing. But I decided, hey, there's these parts of my life where there's some of these habits that are influencing this that aren't better. So I've got to start trying to do harder things and challenge myself. And you get to a spot and you're at a really great position in your dairy that you're at your really nice dairy, and it's easy to get comfortable and think that everything's good, but that doesn't work. You got to keep trying to get better, right? Even if life can be good, but it can always be better. You learn that, hey, I'm capable of doing stuff that I never thought I could do. I mean, the first time I ran an hour, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. And that's the tool that I use. That's the vessel I have right now is running, but it doesn't have to be running for everybody. And sorry to talk about it so much, everybody, but you got to challenge yourself and you got to make yourself do stuff you don't want to do. And again, that's what, by telling my guys we're going to have these meetings all the time, I have to show up to the meetings that I announce that I'm going to have. If I just say I'll get around to it, then I don't do it. So back to that, just hold yourself more accountable than anybody else, and have grace for people and understand their battles and what they're trying to do. I've got my weaknesses and the things that I don't do right and my bad habits, but I'm working on the ones and I'm using the tools that I know how to try to improve that. And if there's other people that have more advice, then I'm always open to learn from that too, right?
The thing I hear between the two of you that I think it's really important to draw out a little bit more is, you just said it, Claire, and you've alluded to it, Tommy. This has not been your lifestyle forever. You have not been endurance runners.
We're still not.
Whatever. You are too.
Let me tell you a quick story, just for a point of I guess reference. So I got a text. It was a video text from a guy that I went to high school with, and my wife and his wife they were like best friends with each other in high school, and so they still get together. So I opened the video and it's him out, he's jogging, right? And he's like, hey Tom, good job doing the 4x4x48. It's a great example for your kids. I was just thinking about you. I'm on mile 48 of an ultra marathon. And I'm like, which is awesome. But I guess to Claire's point, we're just scratching the surface of what the human body is capable of, right? There's people who are running 200 miles at a crack. We were taking breaks for 3 hours in between our 4 miles. So
taking naps.
We were taking naps.
There's harder stuff going on out there than what we're up to, for sure.
There's harder things. There's harder stuff. But I don't want to take away from what the two of you have achieved. And when you both won in your own minds and crossed your own finish lines, essentially you brought a whole community of people along with you. Kind of going back, show me your friends, show me your future. You become the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Who are the voices in your ear? Who are the people that you connect with? And you talked about Claire being one of those people, Tommy. But I know there's also, a group of, there's also ways that you and Claire and other dairymen continue to connect and, plug into each other. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
There's a group of us in Michigan that we all know each other pretty well. I consider them all really good dairymen, but we've got it's a years long group text going. It could be anything from, hey, I'm looking for a milker, to somebody's funny meme, or a lot of other things. Or I don't know how long it's been, about a year, Claire, I think our the lead pastor at our church, he's a good friend of mine. I think I mentioned, and you asked who are the kind of thought leaders or whatever in the first podcast I did, and I mentioned him. But he started sending out a text to 20 guys that he kind of identified as business leaders in the church. Just put a short passage, a scripture, a verse, and then he'll give a kind of a devotion on it, like 2, 3 paragraphs. He calls it running start, second win, and finish strong, are kind of what they're labeled. And he's faithfully done it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for going on a year now, maybe even more. So I started sending it to this group of dairymen, our kind of our peer group. Usually nobody responds, but every once in a while I'll get a personal response like, "Hey, like thanks for sending those, but like this one really grabbed me today." And there's something about knowing that your peers are being fed the same thing that you're being fed that is really powerful when you interact with them, whether it's on a business deal or just a personal deal. You know that they're seeing some of the same information and inspiration that you are, and I think that really it adds, number one, it adds to the relationship. I don't think, I know it does. And especially at first I would be like, oh man, do these guys really want to see these Bible verses Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? And the enemy, the deceiver, kind of tries to talk you out of doing that, right? And Claire's been one that's been pretty good over the course of time. Like, hey man, thanks for sending those. I give our pastor a lot of credit for starting that, and I think that's something that's pretty cool about the dairy industry is it's made up of people who have similar values. And I think I referenced it in our first podcast. Like, when I die, I'm only getting a few words on my headstone, and like, he was a great dairyman. Is I hope that's not what it is, right? Actually, I don't have to worry about that. That is not what it will be.
But let's not overlook your role as a dairyman, right? For both of you, because we've just talked about these extreme things that you've done, these ways that you've challenged and you've pushed yourselves physically and mentally to do hard things. But you're also, at the end of the day, you're on the dairy, your husbands, your fathers, you're active people in the community. Like, let's bring it back full circle. How has pushing yourselves and challenging yourselves physically and mentally made you better at what you do in your primary roles at the dairy and within your own home?
There's just a lot of ways. Leading a business is not, it's not what I thought it was when I was a young man. Still a
What do you
young
mean
man.
by that?
You heard a lot about leading by example is like a big phrase that you hear about leadership. Most days I wish that that meant like grab the shovel and show the guy how to shovel, right? But it's in my role in as a dad and as a leader of our business, it's like it's doing what you said you were going to do. That is a really big deal. Doing the right thing. For example, right now we all know in the dairy industry that these black calves are they're worth a fortune, right? And there's kind of a bidding war right now because spring calving is coming. The beef herd is short. These feeder calves are worth their weight in gold, right? I've heard that some guys are getting upwards of $700 for these things or more. We have a contract with a buyer, right? And our contract is pretty significantly less than what you could go and sell them for today. Some of the people on our leadership team even are like, we're only getting this much for these calves, and I see that they're bringing this much. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. Well, this is a lot of money. We're leaving $50,000 a month on the table. And they didn't know we had a contract, but even after they knew we had a contract, well, is there any way we can get out of the contract? It's like, you know what? My name is written on that contract. Like, I pulled it up and my signature is pretty unique to me, and it's right there on the paper. And I'm not like, I had to like pretty vehemently say, like, we are not, the right thing to do is to not go get that top dollar today for those. We're going to stick to our word. And our livestock manager, he's a great great guy on our team, and he made the call to the guy that was trying to buy him, and he said, "Hey, this is how we do business. If we were buying them from you, if we had a contract from you, we wouldn't go back on it either, right?" And he texted me that day, and he said, "You know what? It's really nice to know that our word at this business means something."
Hmm.
He's not one of my family members. He's on our leadership team, and things like that really validate why we do what we do. It's not always to get the top dollar for a cow, right? Sometimes you don't get the top dollar. Your word has to mean something. And when your word means something to your wife and your kids and your business partners and the people that you do business with, that's like a life's work. I think it applies to doing hard things physically, right? There's some muscle memory there.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
wow,
that'd be my
Tommy.
perspective. I don't know. Claire's probably got a different take. So,
But you really tied it together, right? Because what I heard in that example you just shared from the dairy is two things you said earlier. One was honoring your commitment to what you say you're going to do to someone else, right? And the
mhm,
other was in exercising that muscle of discipline. And
mhm.
that's what you've learned in the other areas of your life that make you better when you show up each day at the dairy. And how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And that's what I'm seeing is and hearing here is the consistency between how you approach doing hard things when you're running and the focus and discipline and accountability and commitment and carrying it all the way through. And Claire, what's your perspective?
Very similar with Tom. You got to stay disciplined in the things that you do so you can allow yourself to have the freedom to do the things that you want to do. And it doesn't always work that way. You don't always satisfy everybody all the time. But I think you got to be careful not to try not to do that, actually. Sometimes you got to focus on certain areas more to get better results out of those areas. Tom put it together really well, but for me, it's if I exercise self-discipline and I can make myself to do these hard things, then I know what I'm asking of other people and what different commitments or sacrifices they have to make, right? And that's kind of like Tom says, you leave with the shit. If I can do it, you can do it. That's not necessarily what I mean, but I know I test myself in different ways, but everybody's being tested. So how to figure out how to navigate those things, it gives me clarity to try to help others and understand their position and maybe not even help them, not go say, hey, this is what I would do, because the people love to hear that, but to just understand what their battle looks like from the perspective of fighting your own battles, whatever you're dealing with. That's kind of how I look at it, and that's where I start with it, and kind of my foundation, I guess I would say, just the discipline to make sure you do things you say you're going to do. That's the most important thing. And if you can't, I mean, you can't do everything you want to do. And that's you get caught in a trap of saying you want to do everything. And I do that. And I've done that, like living 60 miles from all of my friends. I want to hang out every single weekend. I'm in on every plan before I ever talk to my wife and find out all the other plans that I've already made. She's very patient with me on that sort of thing most of the time. But yeah, we can't always accomplish everything that we want to try to do. So focus on what you need to do to get the most important things done and work on everything else. This is a project, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of depth in that, Claire. A lot of depth.
I don't know.
There is. There is. So I'm going to turn this back to you, Claire, because this is something that I know I personally get challenged with, and I think others too, is how have you decided what's a yes and what's a no?
That's hard. That's the hardest word to say is no, right? But maybe Tom said this before on a lot of things. If you try to get to know quickly, like if it's something that you're speculating or thinking, or maybe it's just going to lead to many more longer conversation. Maybe just know if it's not real likely right away, or you got to understand your limits and what you're capable of doing. And old Russian proverb, if you chase two rabbits, you don't catch either one. I think it's really important to focus on what you're focused on, whatever you're doing. When I'm at the dairy, I'm locked in. That's what I'm doing. When I'm running, when I'm doing fun, when I'm doing all those things, I got to be all the way where I'm at, not several places at once. I don't think that is an effective way to try to manage your life, because I think you'll end up with moderate levels of satisfaction that don't add up to anything in the long run. So go take some big swings and try to be really serious about whatever it is you're up to right now, like the moment you're in, right? That's kind of how I try to approach it, which is why I get loose in certain areas sometimes and have some spots. They got to come back, and maybe if you get too out of balance, then you spend a lot of time trying to repair things or put out fires that could have been otherwise solved. Everybody has some of that. So, I mean, just really be where you're at and try to pour yourself into whatever you're doing. I try to do that. I don't always do that, but that's kind of my philosophy.
So it's going back to the buckets, right? Tommy,
My buckets are all out of balance. I only have like 3 gallons of water and 6 or 8 buckets, but a couple are full, like real full sometimes. So I'm a less believer in the balance philosophy. I think go hard, be really, really good at your job, and be really, really good at being on vacation, but don't try to be good at both those things at the same time, because then you're going to be terrible at both.
Oof. Have you always been good at that? Separating?
No, I'm still not good at it. But that's what I tell people to do. That's what I would do if I could do it.
What's helped you?
What's helped me? Deciding what to care about and what not to care about. Deciding how much of a big deal, how much to emotionally invest in any situation, like work-wise or anything. And just understand how you react into a situation affects a situation. So just deciding what's important and what's not. And knowing that nothing's perfect and you're not going to get all the things on the list done. So get the things that are the most important done. Focus on the one things or the 2 or 3 things that you know you have to do to make it so the other things are all a little bit easier in your life, right? Preparation, being accountable to your word, those sort of things. That's what you try to focus on. And again, I'm not good at a lot of this stuff, but this is what I try to do. This is what I spend my days working on.
I'm so glad you shared that. And also the honesty that it's a constant work in progress too, but knowing that you make those efforts and hearing about how you do that. And clearly you're demonstrating that in the ways that you've looked at not just the dairy, but the other pieces of the puzzle too. So, Tommy, did you have more to jump in on there?
I think the one thing that, as you listen to Claire and I talk, is pretty evident that him and I, we're really good friends. We're very different people. And I think that's the power that we get out of the friendship and out of the relationship is, if he was just like me and thought just like me, it would not be as valuable. But there's so many ideas I bounce off of him because he thinks different and better than I do in a lot of ways. And I think that's what relationships are. My wife is the same. If I was married to a person like me, we would be a mess, like at our house, right? Like there'd be, lots of running, nobody cooking, right? So, or lots of spending.
Like being competitive, right? Like I think
the
2 of us are obviously competitive individuals, but like we're not competitive with each other per se. We're not competing against each other. I'm not thinking about trying to run faster than Tom. I want Tom just running a little bit faster than me all the time because that motivates me to keep going, actually. But I think some of our peers look at us and think like, oh, hey, those guys are competing with each other. I don't want to beat Tom at anything. I want to just help keep pushing him because he's pushing me. And we're just trying to see what we can do here, right? As far as motivating each other and motivating other people or whatever. But it's good to be competitive. But I think even as you look at the industry as a whole, as other dairies, like we like to compete with each other with our metrics and our numbers, but those other dairymen are not the competition. There's not enough of us for us to compete with anybody on our own. We're all together in this, right? And we're just trying to, it's supposed to be in a positive light. Not like nobody's losing here. We're just trying to show each other that we could, hey, there's a little bit more here. There's a little bit more we could get from this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so true. So true. What a cool friendship the 2 of you have. And look where it has led you in the ways that you've challenged yourself and pushed yourself. And it's so cool, right? Because all of us have the common thread and all of our listeners have the common thread too of dairy. And that's at the core. And then you go one layer deeper and it's, values and oftentimes our faith as well. But that next commonality, that next layer, and that next level that has really brought your friendship together is just the incessant pursuit of excellence and fulfilling your own potential and questioning the limits on your own potential. And look where it's led you. Look where it's led you. A 4x4 and 48. You've both done 75 hard. And now you're both looking at the future and see the next opportunities to do even more to push yourselves personally, professionally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. We've talked about a lot of stuff today. It's been so incredible and so powerful. And Tommy, you know that I always ask you, what's next? So now that you've had a few weeks to catch your breath after 48 miles in 48 hours, what's next for the two of you?
Well, I know for Claire, I know the date, I know the race. It's May 5th. He's running the Kalamazoo Marathon. I don't have a race on the calendar, but honestly, for me, I want to see him cross that finish line faster than he crossed the last one. And that's why I'm running, be honest with you. And I know that me being out there running every day is going to help. And so honestly, for me, that's really all I have right now. I don't have anything. I have lots of ideas, right? Like I'm a little bit scared of a bike and a wetsuit. You know, I've got something rolling around in my head about the triathlon of some kind. I don't have any race picked out or anything, but I think we both kind of know for us where we think we could be as far as marathon time, 5K time, all these different times. We kind of geek out on our stats, VO2 max, and our cadence, our pace, our heart rate. Like we talk about all those things every week. And so honestly, I'm being real honest about it. Like I want to pace him across that finish line. So
you're going to run together?
We never run together.
We never run together. We do have one. I have one Saranac 10K.
Yes.
We're going to do that.
And we ran the Swisslane 5K. My very first really timed real race. Swisslane had a 5K the COVID year because the race that Tom ran last year, the fifth third was canceled. And we ran that race together, actually.
We did.
10-year-old kid just smoked us.
Oh, just stomped us.
Those dang 10-year-olds.
He's probably like 16 now and even faster, right? So I'm sure it'd be a lot worse today.
Whatever. I think you should demand a rematch.
We had that. We don't even know who he was. I don't think so. I know he's faster. Yeah, we had him in our sights.
He was like the junior Olympic runner.
We were kind of running together, and I was pointing ahead. I'm like, who is this superhuman kid that beating us both? It was fun. It was actually good for the kid.
So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you did run one race together, and you're running, Tom, to just kind of keep encouraging Claire on those runs. And Claire is the Kalamazoo Marathon on May 5th. That's your what's next, or is there more?
Yeah, the ultimate goal here is to run a Boston qualifying time. It's not going to happen on May 5th, but it's going to happen eventually. So, but taking some time off my last one, I'm going to continue to do that. Well, that's my intention, but I'm a long ways away from it. It's a pretty unrealistic goal for somebody that runs my pace, but that's okay. I've got time and I'm enjoying this, and I enjoy running with my friend. And when you got friends like Tom, it's a lot easier to accomplish things. So that ain't going to be easy. No, but I mean, that's it. That's the goal. Now the world knows I got to do it.
And I haven't seen you talk about easy stuff. So
we learned in Born to Run, we don't lose what our 18-year-old potential was until we're 64. So we've got time.
I got time.
Oh my gosh, that's convicting. That means
we've got a lot of time.
You don't lose it if you don't believe you've lost it, right? Mindset.
Yeah.
So goal pace for May 5th. What is it?
8 minutes.
Nice.
58.
Okay. And what do you have to be to qualify for Boston in your age group?
6:58.
6:58.
3 hours, 5 minutes and that ain't happening right now. But I mean, maybe when I turn 40, I'll get a few minutes, but we'll see.
Wow.
I'm a ways away. But I've made progress, and I don't think there's any potential that if I take a break for 5 or 6 years and then try to pick this habit up again, that I'm gonna I think I've lost everything I gained at this point. So now it's just kind of let's see how we can do it. I think I've learned how to manage my time. So get it done in the morning. It's not affecting anybody else's day or taking time from my family or my work. That's beneficial, and I enjoy that part of it. So just keep running.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you've got it. You've so got it. So Claire, you're 37. Tommy, you're 42. Would you both say you're in the best shape of your life right now?
You know what? Very close. I probably couldn't go wrestle for 6 minutes like I did in high school, but I can certainly run a lot faster 10K than I could then. So yes, cardiovascular running shape, best of my life for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. And you, Claire?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you're both total inspirations to me, to many others, not just in what you're doing to push yourselves and your performance on the pavement, but also in those other areas of life and on the dairy too. And I know that others out there that have heard this conversation today, that they too will be inspired in different ways to do those hard things and to get after it, and kind of wrap up takeaways of how you've approached this. Claire, you're the one that said it. Like, the hardest part was committing to it. And then after that, it all was easier. And Tommy, you touched on this too when we talked about those dark morning hours of the 4x48. There wasn't a question in your mind. You were already committed. And that's the same level of commitment that you carry through in the work you're doing on the dairy every day. But you also both talked about the value of being able to push each other in a way that's not competitive with each other, but is encouraging and motivating and really inspiring. And those are the things that I'm taking away, and I hope our listeners are taking away too, of looking at what's that next level for ourselves, of pushing the envelope and not mailing in a day, as Tommy has shared with us, and really just living a full potential life. So grateful for what the two of you have shared. Final thoughts of what you'd like other dairymen and women, and even those in the industry that like to tune in. Final thoughts of what you'd like to leave them with today from your experiences.
For me, I don't want to sit here and pretend that like I have it all figured out. I have just so much to work on. And it's fun to sit and talk about the cool things we've done and all that, but man, there's just a lot I have to work on. Yeah, I don't sit here and on some pedestal like pretending that I've got it just all together, right? So I guess that would be for me. Hopefully I can inspire what we're doing can inspire people to, yeah, live their full potential. That's the goal here. I'm humbled all the time by those who have inspired me and those who are out there doing a better job on their dairies, and whether it's more milk or better employee retention or uh, faster pace of growth or doing a better job taking care of their cows. Like, there's just so many people doing it so much better than me, and I'm still so inspired by so many other people every day. So that'd be kind of things that on my mind.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I know, Tommy, I can always rely on you to keep it real. So thank you. And Claire, final thoughts from you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first and foremost. But I mean, Tom's right. We're not perfect. We're not even close. We're not even that good at a lot of stuff. But you keep trying to be a little bit better every day, and things can be better, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to be leaders in the community, leaders for our families, lead by example in those ways, and the men around us and the women around us and the people that we work with every day. And we try to do the best we can at what we're good at, or what we're trying to be good at, and look to other people and learn from things that they're good at. So improvement is the overall mission. It's the overall goal. And every day, just keep learning and have some discipline and do some things that will make a lot of other things a lot easier. And that's kind of my philosophy. And not to say it's right or wrong, but some of it works.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, gentlemen, Tommy, Claire, it has been such a pleasure to have you as guests on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and not just any episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is episode 100, which is a milestone in the podcasting world and a reason to celebrate. And that is specifically why I invited Tommy and you too, Claire, to be a part of this special episode 100 conversation. This is a big one, and it's a high impact one, and so grateful for what you've been able to share with us today. And thank you for sharing your time and your talents and also your influence and impact. And I know and trust that what you've shared today is going to touch some people in a really powerful way, and the impact of the words that you shared will not end right here. So thank you so much for jumping on for episode 100 of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.
Thanks, Peggy. This was fun.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can do this again.
You just heard from Tommy Oesch at Swisslane Farms and Clare Alderink from Ryzebol Dairy in Michigan on our 100th episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Here's something you might not know about podcasts. There's actually a 95% failure rate. It's estimated that 95% of podcasts never make it to episode 100. But today, you just helped us turn into the triple digits here at the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and we are officially in the top 5%. And it's all because of you. It's because you've been listening and you keep listening. It's because of your positive feedback, the messages that you send to me. It's because of you sharing episodes with others. Thank you every time you hit play. Thank you for every 5-star rating and every time you took a moment to write a review. Please keep doing that and making it possible to allow me to keep serving you. And a big shout out to the sponsors, to those on the industry side who have believed in the vision and the mission for the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. And one of those is Adiseo. Adiseo is a global leader in nutritional solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adiseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information right in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app, available on iOS and through MilkPay.com. And thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.